Do you have any tips now that you're on the other side and you're able to reflect, or any words of encouragement for someone who may be going through a difficult time?
Find people to not emotional dump on, but lean on. Find a support group. And I'm not necessarily meaning like, you go and meet on Wednesday night Bible study support group, but find someone who will support you, like be a good listener.
Welcome to Lead with Heart, the podcast for people who believe that compassion and impact go hand in hand. Great leadership isn't just about results. It's about how we uplift others, inspire change, and serve our communities. If you're looking for insight on how to lead with empathy and make a real difference, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Moryah Jackson, and I'm so glad you're here. Today's conversation is one you won't want to miss. My guest is Holly Coakley, and today we're diving into how we can lead with heart, take action, and build communities that truly put people first. Let's get started. Holly, thank you so much for joining us on the Lead with Heart podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You're welcome. Well, let's jump right in. Tell me about some personal experiences that have shaped the leader that you are today.
I guess I would start off with my military experience. I was in the Air National Guard, the Air Force, for 9.5 years. I got to do a lot with a lot of young people who were just entering the service. And before they left to basic training, we had to kind of do like a holding area for them until they left for basic training. And in that time, we taught them a little bit about what to expect when going to basic training, what to expect when they got back, what to expect from tech school, and basically just how to navigate their first year of military experience. So that would more so be the foundation of how I learned to be of service in that position to other people.
Wonderful. Well, first, thank you for your service. You understand the commitment and dedication it takes for that. And how did that experience directly impact you and your leadership style? Like, what are some of the things that you learned during that time period?
To be completely transparent, I had many examples of how not to lead. I had many examples of what the consequences of poor leadership were. But don't get me wrong, I have memorable examples of people who were just indescribable. Like they were the best leaders in our units and that I've had so far to my experience. They taught me about service. And one of our core values in the Air Force is service before self. And they really exemplified that. They were the standard. And they were also, the impacts of their leadership were also examples of the good consequences of wonderful leadership. And I've been able to see many of my peers that I was in with at that time go on to do great things, basically because of how those particular leaders were involved in our military careers. So.
Oh, that's great. Well, one, I appreciate your transparency. And I think a lot of people tend to think of leadership just as good. I like to tell people that leadership really is influence, and it could be bad influence or it could be good influence. And so it just is. And you're a leader if you have followers. And so often I think we tend to think, oh, it's the good leadership, it's the good experiences. So I'm thankful that you were willing to say, hey, I have so many bad examples, but you also have some good examples. And talk about lead with heart. Service above self is really the epitome of lead with heart. How do you make sure you're caring for others? How do you make sure you're taking care of others? I mean, I think that's a very powerful lesson for you to learn early on, and of course for so long because you were there for a while. I would like to talk more about the bad examples. Do you have a couple of stories that you may be willing to share. We'll protect the names of those that are involved, but I just think they're good lessons from those bad examples. And I know in my experience, sometimes the leaders that I worked for that were not so great, or the people that I was around that were not so great, they taught me the most valuable lessons because I told myself, hey, that's a good example of how I don't want to behave. Or, hey, that's a good example of how I don't want to treat people. And so it let me kind of reflect on who I was and, learn from their experience. So, do you have a couple of examples that you're able to share, and maybe some of the lessons that you learned?
Um, the one there I have one that really particularly stands out, and it's the first time I've ever really, publicly spoken about it. I've spoken about it before, but this is the time that, I first time it'll actually ever really go on record. I was married while I was in the military, and we did not have a very good relationship at all. There were lots of times where I needed both my leadership and his leadership to, step in, because we were both in the military. We were in the same unit. There was a time when he became very threatening on base, like on the military installation, and it came to a point where I pulled up in front of a one of the buildings, the units where our like all of our commanders kind of hang out at that time during the day, and he was actively like pursuing me in his vehicle. Well, no one did anything. They stood around outside and like just watched, and it was very disheartening. He was trying to break the windows out of my car, and they were just like, "Hey, you need to calm down," but no one, like, intervened, and, this guy is 6'6", and my daughter was also in the car at the time. She was 4 months old. But prior to that, like, I had just this was not even the worst occurrence, but this was, like, a really an eye opener for me, um, because I don't want others to be in that position where you go to someone because they're supposed to protect you, or they're supposed to be, in a position to make you feel safe, and they don't, and there's no consequences, there's no active involvement, there's no intervention, there's just nothing. Um And that really opened my eyes. That was a segue for me to go ahead and, decide that I didn't wanna be there anymore just because I didn't feel safe. Um, in the long run, it worked out for the best, but that was one of the most, eye-opening incidents for me where leadership did fail, on several levels, and I didn't feel protected as a resource, because I was a resource in this unit. We all are, human resources, and I just didn't feel protected or valued, and I just thinking about some of the younger people who were in our unit awaiting to go to basic training and tech schools. We would talk about, relationship issues and things like that, and all I could think about was if they were to be in this position, how would they feel? I had made connections with these people, or these young people. I cared about them. I cared about their careers, and I cared about their futures, and they were just so fresh and excited and they couldn't wait to start their military careers. And all I could think about is just what you're coming into this same unit, and are you going to be protected? Especially a lot of the young women. Um, are you going to be valued and protected in this specifically at this base? Um, I just didn't want to see that, happen to anyone. I felt how it made me feel and the possible impacts it could have on my family. specifically my daughter. And I can't have that happen under my influence, if that makes sense.
Mm. No, absolutely. One, Holly, I'm so sorry that you had that experience. I mean, that's a painful, hurtful experience, and um, just a lot of failures from a lot of places. So just I'm so sorry that you had to deal with that. And next, just thank you for being vulnerable. I mean, I clearly heard you when you said, this is the first time that I've publicly talked about that, and I just appreciate you trusting me to share that, and then also sharing it with listeners. I mean, again, these are conversations that we don't typically hear, we don't typically share, and from my perspective, that shows how you are leading from your heart because your vulnerability is going to be a lesson to help someone else. So, again, that my heart just goes out to you, and I'm sure um, you may not want to hear this, but you being strong is just amazing. You're on the other side of that now. So you've made it through it, as painful as it was. And, I think that's a difficult conversation when you're dealing with trauma. Sometimes I think in our culture, it's the toxic positivity, oh, it'll be fine, or oh, everything's okay, or I know, and, I know. And I know sometimes you say that, so it's just, the pain
A
you felt.
coping mechanism.
Right, and it's like the pain that you felt was real, the trauma that you experienced. I mean, that's a very difficult time. Do you have any tips or reflections? Like, what gave you the strength to make it through? I mean, I hear clearly your motivation was one, your daughter. Another motivation is, you didn't want other people, young leaders, to experience what you experienced. You obviously care about women specifically, but what was it that got you through? Like, how are you able to get through each day, or, how are you able to go to work?
Those are just great questions. It was very, very, very difficult. I can't even say that I was operating in a healthy way, you know? I hated it there. Um, when I wasn't there, I was, if not being, the mechanical parent, going through the motions, I was asleep. It was depressing, it was, exhausting. And then there were the unhealthy coping mechanisms like, oh, I'm fine, everything's fine. But you get into this position because it's normalized behavior to not receive, um, not be noticed, but like receive assistance. If you've asked for so many times and then it's just like brushed under the rug or not acknowledged, it seems like things are supposed to be that way. And as a young person, because I was in my mid 20s when that happened, I'm thinking to myself, this it's not that big a deal. I know I feel these things and I feel like things aren't correct or something's not right, but because no one's taking action and it's normalized now, um, you're just not living a healthy, full life. It's just going through the motions. Once I realized that that's what was happening and what I was actually doing, I reached out to a therapist. Um, that was one of and I still go all the time, and it's definitely a journey. It's not something that, happens, like, overnight. I would say there's several other events, and not all of them including, my ex-husband. He plays a role in a good deal of some of the events, but it's it's finding healthy ways to process information, to not internalize it, but then also to not constantly see, yourself as a victim. But I also had to be careful with that because I had to understand, I'm still working on this, like, understanding that things are wrong. Sometimes things happen to you and they are wrong. And you are a victim of these things, but you don't want to continue to live you don't want to continue to live your life, or even I don't even want to begin living my life as a victim, as, "Oh, you poor thing," or anything like that, because I don't want, to enable myself with any crutches, and I don't want anyone else to enable me with any crutches, you know? Um, and I think there's some things that I'm still working on as far as, accepting, that things are wrong, and accepting that something is wrong, because if you continue to ignore that you were the victim of something or some occurrence, that you will internalize it, because I did. And it's unhealthy not only from an emotional perspective, but a physical one too, because your body is just deteriorating from like depression and anxiety and things that you hold inside. And without proper mental, health assistance, you're not going to understand what's going on. And it's just going to can literally just drive you crazy. My faith plays a huge role, but I wasn't really able to understand my faith without understanding my emotional process. So both therapy and a combination of my faith just helped me continue to move forward in a way that is productive and positive and in a healing way, as opposed to just like wallowing.
That's, amazing. I mean, you just shared so much information. You are a very strong person. It's obvious that you've been doing the work, and just to see you here, just pleasant, positive, with a smile on your face. So a few things I wanna talk about. One, you talked about just your age. You were just starting out, you're learning, and as I reflect and I mature, I think about, experience helps you develop wisdom. And so until you have a certain amount of experience, you really don't understand, or you may not even have the words to process what you are experiencing. And I love how you said it. You knew it didn't feel right, it wasn't right, and it wasn't sitting right with you, but you didn't necessarily have the words to explain what was going on. And it was wrong. I mean, you knew it was wrong. And so it's amazing how our bodies say that. You also hit on safety. At work, leaders should provide safety. So often we talk about psychological safety, and it's fascinating to me, in my experience and through my research. There are so many people who are put in a leadership role. They have a title, but they don't understand the psychology of talking to people or managing people. They don't understand about mental health or motivation or communicating. And so, not to make an excuse for your unit or the people that were involved, I wonder, did they even know or understand or have the skill set to realize, what they needed to do? So I just commend you for deciding to go and get a therapist. So often that's still taboo. I think there's been a lot of conversation about mental health and it's more acceptable, but I still think a lot of people don't talk about that. And guess what? You're not alone. I have a therapist too. I've had therapists, and it's really good to have another person that has the training, that has the experience, that can help you, like you say, process in a healthy way. And just you talking about your body. There's a book, I think it's called The Body Keeps the Score. And so when you're dealing with emotions or just anything and you think you're fine, but you're tired or you're fatigued or, you never get enough rest or you feel like you're hungry, that's your body telling you something's not right. You need to take care of yourself. And it's amazing how powerful and wise our body really is. So, I probably didn't hit on everything. I should have been taking notes. I just commend you, for one, being able to share this. And again, leading with heart is about vulnerability. And I think a lot of leaders aren't vulnerable to talk about what I like to call the messy middle, the things that you're going through, the things that you grow through. And quite frankly, those experiences have helped make you a stronger person, a more empathetic leader, and I'm sure your ability to sense things is different because, again, you went through that experience, then you've been reflecting on the experience, you've been processing, and so you've just been elevated in terms of your leadership. Was it fun? No. Wasn't wasn't it difficult? Of course, but the fact that you said, "Hey, I wanna get through this in a healthy, positive way," recognize, like, yes, I was the victim, but I don't wanna give my power away and be a victim. I wanna do something with this. I mean, again, that just speaks, volumes about you and who you are as a leader. So, again, thank you. Well, I wasn't expecting to take that turn, but again, I think it was good. From your experience, and you've had a lot of experiences, do you have other tips maybe for our listeners on how to make it through something difficult? I also think you talked about probably talking about parenting, being a mechanical parent, but I know sometimes we're just able to do what we have to do. Like I don't know how I did it. I just did it because I had to do it. I had to pay the bills, I had to take care of somebody. But do you have any tips now that you're on the other side and you're able to reflect, or any words of encouragement for someone who may be going through a difficult time?
Say I have 2 parts to that based on my experience, okay? Find people to not emotional dump on, but lean on. Find a support group, and I'm not necessarily meaning like, you go and meet on Wednesday night Bible study support group, but find someone who will support you, like, who be a good listener, and also not just someone who listens to hear what you're going through, because I have also dealt with people who, they're just interested in the storyline. I've recently, stopped being friends with someone for we've been friends for over 20 years, because I finally realized that she was just there for the storyline. And it was revealed to me in just a simple on her way to my home and butt dialed and left a 3-minute voicemail. And it was heartbreaking, but at the same time, I felt free because of the discernment that I had been asking for, to be able to decide, like, who is supposed to be part of my journey or not. I'm still in the messy middle. I'm still trying to, um, I still trying to get my business off the ground. I'm still raising my daughter. I'm still not. I don't think we'll all ever be where we want to be, ultimately, but I'm still not as satisfied as I would like to be. I'm not as comfortable as I would like to be. We're never going to be comfortable. And again, going back to my faith, I'm fine with that because we're not supposed to be comfortable, when it comes to service and the backgrounds of our faith, because we're supposed to be emptying ourselves of ourselves, and that's never going to be comfortable. But I'm not I don't feel like I'm stable just yet. um as far as accepting that I don't like to go too deep into faith talk, because I don't want there's so much negative connotations that go with the way Christians have been treating people. So I shouldn't, and I try not to talk about it as much. But when we're operating in service to God, and we're supposed to be emptying ourselves, and everything that we do is His will, and for His glory, then everything else is like you don't think about it. If you're truly focused on letting your hands and your eyes and your mouth and your heart and feet and everything be for the will of God that day, then everything else is just obsolete. There's the discernment that comes in that's, hey, does God want me doing this? Does He want me operating in that way? Am I being an efficient and effective tool in order to glorify, His will and His plan? That is what mostly keeps me focused, because when you're operating in that way, you're not going to be comfortable, because you're at that point a tool of of God. You know, yes, we're humans and people and all that, but we're tools for a plan that he has for, you know, this earthly realm. And that really, it may sound corny and loopy and great, but that's what keeps me focused. Um, because I know that he has good for me and good for the outcome of the plans that he has. So, you know, if it's a bad day for me emotionally, I know that I've followed his instructions and his guidance for that day because I asked for it and he told me, you know, just ask. And even if it feels like, oh, I don't have enough money today, or I can't do what I want to do, or so and so is mean to me, I still operated in my truth and knowing who I am in Christ. So I'm fine with it, you know, and I do say I'm fine a lot. It is a coping mechanism to a certain extent, but also, it's like a reminder to myself that, you know, just you are fine. Everything is fine. It is okay because you know who you are in Christ, you know, he takes care of you. You know, the whole scripture about the birds and being able to eat and I have clothes, I have place to lay my head at night and you know, things like that are what that's what keeps me grounded, you know.
I love that. And no, you're completely valid in your belief and thank you for sharing that. And I mean, it's faith in action. And, you know, I admire you for being a light and shining your light no matter what and allowing your faith to ground you in your purpose. I mean, I think that's very powerful. And I'm going to date myself. I think we're probably in the same generation, but it makes me think about the wristbands, well, I think it was everywhere. I think it was wristbands, bumper stickers, everything. You know what I'm about to say? It was, "What would Jesus do?" And that was just a thing, and I mean, I even remember in school, you know, that was just a thing you would say, and, you know, hopefully it would help you remember, you know, you should govern yourself accordingly. You should act in a certain way. And so I think that's wonderful that your faith is what guides you in your leadership. And I really believe that that's an example of leading with heart. You know, it's what's in your heart. And I think that's a very powerful message for our listeners to hear right now. And I think it will help people reflect on themselves as well and maybe reflect on their values and their character and their behavior. And one of my favorite words is it in alignment? You know, alignment. Are your values in alignment with how you're behaving and how you're acting and how you're treating people? So I think that was powerful. So thank you. What what gives you hope right now? There's a lot of things going on in society. There's a lot happening. What's something that gives you hope?
Again, I mean, I go back to my faith is this is not the end game, and all of this everything that's happening is not unexpected, you know. Read Bibles. It's in there, you know, the behavior of people, the decisions, choices that people are making, it's all it's all there. Like we're so I'm not afraid. I don't live in fear. There's I'm solution oriented. So when there is an element of fear or something that comes that could be potentially scary, um, I just remember that I was told not to be afraid. So now let's find a solution. How do we plan through this? How do we get through this? Um, who can I speak to that may be better, you know, versed at getting through something like this, who's been through this before, who can help guide me through it with discernment, you know? And it's not all the time leaning on other faith-based people or other, you know, believers or Jesus followers. There's no because someone else just based on their faith doesn't or their religious background can still go through, of course, go through things and be able to guide you. And that's a part of like community, you know what I mean? That's part of using your community resources to help you, like, get through things. You don't just rely on your own self, don't just rely on your own discernment, you know, seeking others and being able to be vulnerable to seek others, input and their testimonies and receiving that stuff in a way that will help you, move forward with whatever you're dealing with. But also being careful again and asking for discernment and being careful that again people aren't just there for the story or the entertainment, of your life because that happens quite a bit. People just involved, they just want to know the tea and the drama and what's going on in your life. And then sometimes they're just not as connected. And I mean, they're so miserable that they want to hear your downfalls or your troubles to make themselves feel better, you know? So identifying people who are um, going to be beneficial for your journey, but not completely shutting out people who won't, because that's where your service and leadership and example comes in to, misery does love company. You're not going to get mine, but you can come along this way. You know what I mean? So
That's
that's
very powerful. I mean, again, I need to take notes as I'm talking to you. Um, but
I
I
say things for me as reminders to myself too, because it's not easy to just anybody can say anything. We all know what sounds good and what feels good and we can be whoever we want to be, on these internets and, on paper, but like you were saying, the acting, acting. So I'm saying it for myself as well because sometimes it is hard to extend grace. Sometimes it's hard to not, join that misery and retaliation. You think about it, you think this is, what I should do. What's the get back? Or how can I, counteract this behavior? But it's, there's like levels. For example, my ex-husband, I used to go back and forth with him, you know? Once I stopped doing that, you see the difference in, your expectations become different for that person and the relationship you have with that person. You start setting boundaries and adhering to those boundaries. And then eventually this person learns how to interact or deal or move forward, or maybe they might even say, "Hey, why are you extending such grace? Why are you being so nice to me?" And then that's an opportunity for you to say, "Well, this is my faith belief." There's so many opportunities to introduce people to Jesus without, "Oh, you should read your Bible and go to church and da da da." It's acting, it's behaving in a certain way, it's treating and serving and just being involved in a way that brings nurturing and positivity. Um, and that's how you bring people closer together in a community and to be able to work, to me, my opinion, how to be able to bring people together to work in a community in a peaceful way, even if you don't like each other.
Right, no, I think that's very powerful for you to say that, and I wanna, hit on a few things that you talked about earlier. You mentioned fear, and I believe fear and hate goes hand in hand, and I really do believe that love is stronger than fear. Love is stronger than hate. It's harder to hate, so, why not love? And you just said that, if I'm willing to extend grace and demonstrate love, maybe this person will say, "Why are you being so nice to me? Why" and they might understand and they develop. And so I firmly believe that, it's so much easier to love than it is to hate. And I mean, you mentioned that, why do I want to think about, the get back, or why do I want to think about going to their level when I want to be a light? I want to be a source of, goodness. So I think that's very powerful. Um,
Oh,
Another thing that you
it's
oh,
hard.
no, it's definitely not easy, and so, yeah, I don't expect that at all, but another phrase that I learned, actually over a decade ago, I was in a training session, with a workshop, and the facilitator said, hurt people." And that was the very first time I heard that phrase, and it was a huge shift for me. When I heard that, I was like, wow, you're right. When there is some type of action or behavior, there's some type of trauma that was not resolved. There was some type of pain that was not transformed into something positive. And then what really motivated me was that there is a bright side. when people are healed, you have healed people who help people. And so it's really important, how do you transform that trauma into something? And I think you're a great example of this. You went through something very difficult. You've done the work. You said you're still doing the work, but you are consciously making the decision, I'm not going to allow whatever is happening to me change me and change who I am. And so I think that's, again, another strong example about what it means to lead with heart, what it means to be vulnerable. And honestly, quite frankly, Holly, the reason why I wanted to do this podcast at this time with this title, Lead with Heart, is because I want to amplify voices that are leading differently. I want to amplify the good stories. I want to talk about the tips of, okay, how do you become an example, because there's so many examples of goodness out there, but so often negative stories hit the news, or so often it's the bad things or the scary things that dominate the headlines. But I'm a firm believer that there are people, just like you, every day doing the little things that matter. Your kindness is rippling in ways that we can't even quantify. So, thank you for being true to who you are, and thank you for leading with your heart, because just your goodness, your smile, and again, I'm sitting here talking to you, and I mean, this is you all the time. You're always smiling. You're always positive. You're always helpful. And, I had no idea about the depths of what you dealt with. And so you are making a difference. You are leading a heart. And so it is just amazing. You're welcome. And I just appreciate you being so vulnerable, because again, I wasn't expecting that to be the conversation today. And I know we covered a lot, but is there anything else that you would like to leave with our listeners? Or is there one thing you would like them to take away? Or there, words of encouragement or advice about, what not to do, or, what to do based on your experience? Because I think experience is the best teacher. There I like to say that books and schools, they have theory, but real life and those hard lessons, that's the practice. And when you have an opportunity to combine both of them, combine the theory and the practice, like you say, put words to experiences or reflect on what's happening. I really believe that's where the growth and learning occurs. And I believe that it really shortens a learning curve when people are able to listen to someone who's been through it, and even if you're still going through it, there are lessons that you learned, that can help someone else. So anything you would like to share?
Um, I just wanna touch on again, the importance of mental health, and seeking someone or group of people that can help you process, emotions and things that are emotional responses of things that you may be dealing with, or any past trauma or anything like that. It's extremely important, and not just because, of the commercialization of it, not just because it's a popular thing, but because a good psychologist or therapist, these people go to school to study, the patterns of thinking and how the brain operates, the chemicals that are released into our body, the science behind, um, how the body operates and responds to emotional trauma, or even like all of the things. They are experts in their field, but also they're people too. So you have to find someone who's a good fit. And it's okay if the first couple aren't. That doesn't mean like oh, therapy doesn't work for me, because I've been through a couple. Um, and it's not that they were bad. It was just we weren't a good fit, and that's okay. But I found I'm very happy now. And it wasn't that I was unhappy, it's just, again, not a good fit. But trust the professionals, and trust yourself. Like, learn how to trust yourself and your decisions. But trust a professional to understand how to help you walk through this journey or like navigate through your emotions because it's just so important. You learn things about yourself and how your body operates and responds that no meme on Instagram or Facebook, no motivational video is gonna teach you about yourself, you know? And it's those videos and those things, they sound good every 15 seconds, you know, it sounds great. But then when you put your phone down and you go outside, are you able to apply that? You know, because someone made you angry or did something, you know, really hurtful or dishonest to you, are you going to refer back to this meme or are you going to use the tools that um, someone who studies emotional responses and the science of how we respond to things, you know, operate with also with doing your own research and, you know, taking the tools that a therapist gives to you and expanding on them and tailoring them to your own needs. Um, I'm just such an advocate for going outside yourself and even outside of, you know, the church walls to get to speak with a therapist, someone who you trust to help you navigate through. And at the end of the day, there is that saying, we're all just walking each other home. And that's one of my favorite things because or one of my favorite sayings because we are, you know, this is not the end game. This these 4 walls, this room, the building, it's not the end game. We have a goal to, like, collectively serve one another as a community, and as cliche as it sounds, but spread love, you know, and support one another, and all of these sayings that we've gone so far into, again, commercializing, but we don't actually do, you know? We've missed the mark on a lot of things when it comes to that, and I just hope that people will go back. When you're scrolling and you see something that's like, "Oh, that sounds really good," maybe write it down and then actively practice it throughout the day and see, like, what kind of, you know, what kind of change that might take place in your life or help you think differently about responding to situations.
Absolutely. I think, again, wonderful information to share. I love that you are an advocate for mental health, and it's so important to find the right therapist. And it might take a little bit of time. You'll know, but also you hit on it. You have to do the work. You have to be willing to apply the tools, and just like anything, it takes time. We didn't learn how to talk, walk, read overnight. It takes time. And so it's going to take time to be able to apply those lessons in your life. So I think that's very powerful. Another thing that you said made me think about this in terms of health. Your leader or your manager has more of an impact on your health than your doctor. And so if you're working with someone, 40 plus hours a week, and there are challenges there, there's tension there, that really impacts your health. And that ties back to what you said about, just um, you know, your body dealing with all of those emotions and feelings. And so, from my perspective, it's critically important that anyone who has a title of manager or leader or anyone who's responsible for other people, it's critically important that they do the work, that they understand the responsibility that they have and the impact that they make on other people. And it's not something to be taken lightly. And in my experience, I found that there are people who are very talented and very skilled and great at doing a particular job, but they might not be as good in terms of dealing with people because, again, that's a different skill set. Just because you can do one doesn't mean that you can do the other. And so, again, part of the reason why I wanted to create the Lead with Heart podcast is to help change that conversation. And, what I do hope is that people will take it very seriously when they have the opportunity to work with people, and that they will use that influence, they'll use it for good. And so I love that you talk about those phrases. I don't think they're cliche. I think, we do need to lead with love. We do need to spread love and goodness, but we really have to do it and not just market it, because I've also seen people who'll say all the right things. I'll see the people, they'll talk about the right things, but they don't walk their talk, and that's really disheartening. Well, Holly, it has been amazing talking with you today. I mean, we've hit on so many different points. Again, thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for sharing insight and tips. I'm confident that what you said and what you shared will definitely help listeners, and they will be able to apply what you shared to their life as well. And so I just appreciate that, because, again, so often it's scary being vulnerable, or you don't want to share those stories. So just thank you. I really appreciate it. It was great talking to you.
You as well. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.